All righty. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our DeFi webinar, From Zero to Stunning, a hands-on introduction to DeFi render. Um, I'm excited to present our speaker today and our team showing up for this. Kelsey Colvin Shag on our team, sales operation managers here in the back end to help uh, sift through any questions that pop up, and we'll curate those and answer those questions at the end. Please feel free to ask us anything you want to, care to in the Q&A section of our meeting webinar tool here, Zoom, and we will get to those at the end. And if Andy can answer some of those on the fly, we will. But rest assured, we'll get to Q&A at the end. Okay. Um, it's my pleasure to introduce Andy
Hi, everybody.
Cristoforo here today. I'm excited to have him join us. Andy and I have been chatting quite a bit over the last several months here, and I'm especially honored to have him join us because of what he's putting into his latest endeavor, which is ArchViz Academy. And I know what it takes to do visualization work. I know what it takes to kind of go from zero to hero with projects and production and the architectural space. And I know it takes a lot of pain and trials and errors to get to perfection. Been there, done that. And Andy's efforts with our ArchViz Academy to spread the knowledge, spread the wealth, spread the joy and skills that are associated with doing great work are it's exciting to see what he's pulling together for this. And also excited to see to do this with D5 and to see D5's growth and the tool set that these guys at D5 are putting together for the ArchViz community, architects, interior designers, all the way to freelancers and so on. It's amazing to see what's growing out of that product, and Andy's really deep in the weeds on it, and I'm excited to have him present today. So without any further ado, I'll just turn this over to Andy and let him have at it.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Corey, for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me. So I'm just going to share my screen, send a request. Perfect. All right, awesome. And thank you to everyone that's attending. It's actually amazing to see a lot of my own students from the ArchViz Academy here, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But this webinar or workshop, because you're going to be able to follow along, we'll be providing models and everything, is all about zero to stunning, and this is a hands-on introduction to D5 render. If you have experience with D5 render, this is a nice little exercise or portfolio piece that you can use. And our goal today is to really do this, to take this SketchUp model and turn it into this in about 45 minutes. And that's one of the things I love about D5. It's like so easy to make really beautiful visuals in such a short period of time. Again, like in 45 minutes, we're going to have something that looks like this, and I'll show you, how I work, my typical workflow and everything. And this can become a portfolio piece. Like, why not? So really awesome. We're sharing the SketchUp model. I believe Kelsey's dropping it in the chat and everything. Yeah, awesome to see all these familiar faces and everything. So I'll also drop some links in there. We'll talk about that in just a moment. All right, so if you don't know me, my name is Andy Cristoforo. I recently started what I'm calling the ArchViz Academy. This is basically a structured premium platform for learning everything ArchViz related. So I go over the foundations, the technical skills of D5. We talk a little bit about AI and then also the business stuff. And so the point of this was like, I wanted to take my 15 years of experience doing this and just package it up nicely. And it's one of those things like when I started learning all this, because I didn't go to school for this, nobody really goes to school for this, at least in the US. There were no structured resources. So it was my goal to put this together and most importantly, put together a really awesome community of like-minded ArchViz artists, designers, architects, engineers that can talk about this in like a safe, mentored space. So that's what the ArchViz Academy is all about. if you're interested, feel free to shoot me an email after. We've got some awesome promotions going on, and we also have a bunch of people from the community in the chat. So I feel like, that kind of speaks to it, that I've got people in this community that are also willing to take time out of their day to watch me talk about all this stuff. But a little bit more about me. I am a D5 certified instructor. I'm also a professor at the School of Visual Arts and FIT in New York. I've been doing online teaching for probably almost like a decade. And I actually have to update this slide, but we actually hit 15,000 students worldwide. And I've been fortunate enough to present at GTC, Autodesk University, 3DNY, ATN, and How to Rhino. So I've been around the block, and I really love doing this. I think it's just amazing, teaching people to go from zero to hero in just a short period of time, because I'm basically your guide, your shortcut. So instead of you freaking out trying to figure this out for like a decade, you just listen to me for a little bit and you start making really nice renderings. So that's my goal. So just to talk about what we're doing today, I already introduced myself. Corey did as well. We're going to be doing this workshop. Again, this is something you can follow along with. The links are in the chat. So make sure you're downloading it. It is a SketchUp file. Don't worry, you don't need to have SketchUp. I'll show you how to use D5 without SketchUp. And I'm going to go through the whole process. This is all recorded. So if you miss a step, you can always revisit the recording after this. We'll be sharing that recording. I'll wind up, probably posting it to YouTube and sharing it to the ArchViz Academy as well. So you guys can always refer to that. And I also don't like just talking at you guys. So if you have a question while I'm doing something, feel free to drop it in the chat. If I, happen to miss it, someone, either Corey or Kelsey, can shout it out. But I want this to be interactive. I want you guys to be engaged. Again, this is hands-on. You could chill back and watch me do this, but I don't know, kind of defeats the point. So make sure you download the models and let's get into it. So I'm going to minimize this. And right before I do that, just want to show, this is the ArchViz Academy, archviz3dacademy.com. And this is like all the good stuff we talk about. So we could talk about that later. Anyways, back to the project at hand. So I showed you the renderings I did, and I don't want to poop on anyone's work, but I actually think the rendering we're going to do in an hour is actually better than the marketing images that they have done. So this is the only reference image I have. So I'll be basing all the materials off of this. So I think we can do better. So how I start is I go over to D5 and I'm just going to hit new, and it's going to load up a project. And while that's going, let me just check the chat, see if anyone's in here or any questions. Cool. All right, great. So I'm gonna X out of this and go full screen. So with any D5 project, the first thing I always do is I switch the navigation mode from orbit to fly, just because I'm most comfortable with the WASD controls, and all the move controls are down here. If you ever want to pay some more attention about, how to move up and down, I will kind of talk about which keys I'm pressing, but if you see me moving differently from you, because default is orbit, that is why. I don't believe in orbit. I'm team fly here. So let's get started with importing. First thing you do, you go up here to import. There is a SketchUp plugin, but for those who don't have SketchUp, you can use the direct import method. So I'm going to hit import here, and I'm just going to open up the SketchUp file. You guys have this in that link that's been shared. And now it's going to be added to my import container right here. And always remember that the import container is different than your object outliner. This shows everything in the scene. This shows everything that is in your import container that has to be imported into the outliner. So I'm going to click once and then click here. Right now, this model is in the middle of nowhere. It has a incorrect coordinate system. So we're just going to hit this button called sync coordinates. And this is really important if you work with multiple people at the same time. Let's say you're an architect, you're working with a landscape designer. They need to bring in their own file. If you use sync coordinates, everyone's coordinates will sync on the same place. For those, Revit users, you guys know how important, coordinates are. So I've got that there. You can also see that I've got terrain clipping in here. So I'm just going to go over to my object outliner and hit the eyeball on terrain to turn that off. So next thing I always do is I make sure I don't work in the dark. So right now, the front face of the building is in shade. The side is bright, but when I'm doing materials, I always want to make sure I'm working in sunlight. So I'm just going to tweak the north offset just so I get a little bit of sun on both sides. Exactly. So now I can actually see what I'm doing because you should never work in the dark. So first thing we want to tackle are our materials. Then we'll get into, adding some entourage, trees, ivy, and all that, and then the context, and then we'll take some renderings. So, and just like right out of the gate, I feel like the model already looks better than the reference images, and I think part of that is due to the SketchUp model actually having mapped textures. So one of the issues, or issues and benefits, is this is a texture map that someone actually spent the time to map correctly. There's no like half bricks, and there's actually some beautiful brickwork here that they took the time to map. So I actually don't want to overwrite their work. I don't want to, put a new material that doesn't map correctly. I can actually use this. So although it's a flat texture from SketchUp, I can modify it. So I'm going to hit I on my keyboard or click the eyedropper, and I'm going to click my brick material. Anything that's brick is going to be this black highlight. This is how D5 tells you if something is selected or not. So now that I've got the brick here, you'll see I only have a base color map for this brick. It's missing all the other maps, and because of that, it's not super realistic. So D5 has some amazing tools to improve that. So this is a low res brick materials. So what I can do is I can use the built-in texture enhancer and run an Ultra HD texture enhancer. So this is kind of like if you've used Magnific, it's an image upscaler. So it's going to improve this like super pixelated, probably like 512 by 512 texture and make it look something like 2K. So I can preserve all that mapping without having to, start from scratch. So it's thinking for a little bit. And once it does that, I can run it through the AI generated material. Yeah, look at that. So now much cleaner. So I'm just going to hit confirm. Now I can run it through AI generated texture map tool, and it's going to look at this and generate a normal map, a roughness map, and AO map. And these are things architects and designers hate to do manually. So I love that it's built in here. Um, and it's an automatic process because to do this manually, you'd have to bring it into Photoshop or another tool like bitmap to material. You'd have to convert the image to a normal map, and then you'd have to convert your base image into black and white to make your roughness and everything. It's time consuming. Nobody does this. And that's why when you look at like in-house renderings, sometimes they look like flat because people don't know you need all those maps. Well, D5 understands that, and they've basically fixed that workflow issue. So right now it's going to think, and you'll see, look at that. So now it's added all this detail here. So it added the normal. And if you don't know what the normal is, that's basically how proud the brick is from the mortar. It added the roughness map. So basically how shiny or where the brick should be shiny, and an ambient occlusion map, which is AO. AO just controls the contact shadows. So here's nothing and here's something. So it just added all that realism in just seconds. So that's why I'm a big fan of it. And like, I didn't have to use anything from the D5 asset library. I used something that was built right into D5. So this looks great. All I'm going to do is just toggle something called round corner. And for any exposed corners, it's just going to round it out. I'll show that in other materials, but it's just a good habit to get into because nothing in the world is perfectly straight or sharp like this. And we'll talk about fixing that in a moment. So now that the bricks are in a really good spot and they look, realistic, they're not tiling or anything. This is all mapped nicely. Let's start working on the other materials. So there's a couple ones we need to tackle. There's this like spandrel kind of tile guy here. And then there's this like vertical plaster stucco material. And then, there's the landscaping materials. So let's work on these vertical guys. So I could go through the same process we did, but I want to show you, the fun parts of D5 and the asset library. So I'm just going to go over to assets. I click that, make sure I'm under material, and I'm going to look for some sort of plaster. So you could just search for plaster or paint. We've got this. So let me try beige plaster. And I know you're probably saying, well, this is beige and this is like red and orange, but I'm going to show you how we can tweak that. So I'm going to hit I on my keyboard, and now we can see everything is this gray material. It is high res though. So if I get up really, really close, right, I can see all the different pores. It looks, super realistic, but I do need to tint it. So right here under base color, if you click this, there's a little color picker here. And for those that work with like, you know, like Pantone chips or like even metal samples, you can just hover over a picture and it can be outside of D5. It doesn't have to be within D5. It'll pick up those colors. Like here it's, you guys can't see this, but it's picking up my skin tones and then my background. And it's picking that up as colors. So if I click anywhere on this brick, I now get that same color of the brick. And all I'm going to want to do is probably, desaturate it a bit so it's not that vibrant color. And that's what these guys are. That's hue, saturation, and value. So saturation lowered is going to desaturate it, right? And value is going to brighten it. And it's going to move these guys in the respective coordinates. So you see that? So I'm happy with this. I don't want it to be like too orange. So now that that looks good, let's go through some of the settings. I think these are all calibrated correctly. I'm going to turn on UV randomizer just to make sure it's completely seamless. And I'm going to turn on round corner, and that fixes this edge here because with plaster and how it's molded on, right? You're never going to get that sharp corner. So that looks good. I could play with the scale some more to make it bigger or smaller. So let me try 0.5. That's a little too extreme, so I'll do 0.8. And every single material and texture is going to be different. So it's not like you can always say, hey, it's got to be 0.8. It's going to change. So just keep that in mind. So I'm happy with that. Let's talk about this like spandrel kind of thing. It looks like a terracotta kind of tile. So I'm just going to go over to assets and I'm going to go to wall tiles. And I've got all these fantastic options. And let's find something. Let's find something that fits. This one looks good. I like this dark red striped stone. So I'm going to click this and I'm going to paste it here. And it's coming out dark. So I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to edit it and I'm going to play with the base color. So here I'm just going to brighten it up by going up like that. And then if I want to take it to the next level, I can go to the base color map and then I can desaturate it. And that's going to remove some of that color. And I can also brighten it. So I actually like the look of that. Okay, cool. So we've got that. And just looking at the material, I can see the normal's working, the roughness is working nicely. I'm getting some nice variation, so that makes it look nice and realistic. Then we've got this metal here. That's basically the top and bottom of our windows. So you could do a similar workflow where you can edit a material from scratch. I could play with the metalness here to tune it, or I could find something from the asset library. Since this is coming from the architect, it's very likely they've picked this specific color under the base color. So I don't want to mess with it too much, but I do want to play with the metallic settings. I do want it to look like it's actually metal. And you can see big difference. That's flat. This is metal. So just doing something like that is going to make a big difference. Same thing with playing with the roughness. A 0 roughness will be mirror-like. Higher than that is going to kind of soften it up, scuff it up. And then this is kind of like a rubber, right? Which we don't want. We want something like this. Okay. And the normal here is helping break up the reflection. So this is nice. This looks like a nice anodized panel. If I want more realism, I would probably grab something from the D5 library that's got some sort of texture. You see this, like the brushed aluminum. So that's something I could do. So this is what I would do. I would grab my color values here, and I'm just going to switch to the hex, and I'm going to copy this to my clipboard because, again, they probably want this color on purpose, but I do want the vertical lines here. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to paste it here. And now I'm going to go to base color, keep my hex, and then I'm going to paste that. And that just took the same exact color, but look at that. Now I get the correct base color and I get the normal that's controlling that. So it makes it look slightly more realistic than before instead of it just being a flat color. So keep in mind that is a super handy trick that people often forget. Hex codes go a long way. Same thing with round corner. We're going to do that and we're going to get some nice corner edges right here. So let me toggle that on. And you can see we're getting nice highlights here because again, they're molding or they're bending the panels. So I can lower this radius a little bit if I think it's slightly too strong or make it bigger, right? You don't want to go too far. Just a little bit of a highlight. That's how you know it's working correctly because the sun's hitting that edge. So that looks great. Happy with that. And just for the sake of my sanity, I'm going to hit Control S on my keyboard to save. And like a bad architect, I'm going to put it on my desktop. Sorry. All right. Any questions so far? Looks like chat is empty. That's fine. So Now that we've got all that, let's work on the glass. So the glass, this is just a default material. I personally always go to the glass library and I start with normal glass. So I grab that and I paste it here. And usually what I do is once I get the HDRI, so like the background and the time of day, then I tweak the actual like thickness and opacity. So right now it's like 100% see-through. Pay attention to the windows out here. I can see right through. Then that's kind of when I start playing with, okay, are the reflections too bright, too dark? So it's hard to do early on until you have everything in there because you're not judging it off the final outcome. So that's why I kind of leave it in limbo in progress, right? So just looking at this overall, I'm pretty happy with it. There's some things I probably would tweak. I might just like brighten this area up just so I'm getting similar tones. Yeah, exactly. With the rest of the materials. Exactly. So that looks good. So now let's talk about the context, our asphalt here, and all these guys. So I'm going to go over to assets, and since I want asphalt, I can just type in asphalt. I don't need to find the category, and I'm just going to grab this guy, asphalt 2. I could use 3. Yeah, really depends. And let's see how this is. So you can see, and this is why, if you guys watch my content, I always use the UV randomizer because you see this tiling right here. If you look really carefully, pay attention to this like little triangle right here. That drives me nuts. You don't want that. So I'm going to edit the material and I'm going to put on the UV randomizer. But you're probably saying, well, Andy, there's no UV randomizer. That's because the displacement material template does not support that. Since this is asphalt, my opinion, you really don't need displacement. So I'm just going to switch to custom and then I get that back. So I can turn on UV randomizer and boom, it's completely gone. So it still looks beautiful and realistic, but I don't have that weird displacement thing that was turned on. So I could play with the scale some more if I want. So let me try 0.2. I think that's way too much. Do 0.4. So that looks good. You always want to be able to kind of like see some of the texture. If it's too small, you can't really appreciate it, right? So sometimes I might go a little bit larger than you would typically see, but that's just because without texture, it just looks flat like that, right? So then let's go over here. We've got our curb, same workflow. Let's go to assets, and I'm just going to search for concrete right under the concrete here. And lightweight concrete is totally good enough for this. So I'm going to paste that in. Okay. And like always, I make sure I've got round corner on because we all know how concrete formwork works. I'm going to leave that there. And I'm going to put on my UV randomizer. So that's all mixed up. And that looks good. I might bump up the scale a bit. Let's go 0.5. Yeah, perfect. Cool. All right. And now we've got kind of like this little planting area. So I'm just going to get a little curb for this and we'll get some soil in from there. Oops. So I'm going to, again, I'll go with rough concrete. We'll just mix it up. Okay. And as always, get that round corner on. Boom. And now let's talk about the soil here. This is going to be under, natural raw or outdoor ground. There's a couple different options. I'm going to go with one of these. I like the stuff with leaves because generally like plants drop some sort of leaves, right? And this looks pretty good. All right. So now all that's left is we've got this and we've got our context here. So I really like the tiling that this person's done before in the SketchUp model. So I want to preserve this. So we're going to go through that same workflow that we went through before. You go to base color map, go here, and then make it Ultra HD. So that's going to boost the resolution of this. Because again, they mapped it perfectly. I'm sure it was a spec from a project. So I'm going to use this. If let's say, this happens to architects all the time, you're working on a granite and you find the spec, but it's tiling. You could use Make Seamless and it'll fix that. That's really handy. So again, use these tools. It's built in. It saves you so much time because you're not going to find everything in the D5 library, right? Like this is very, very unique. You'll get close, but it's not going to be perfect. So this is now loading up, the normal map, the roughness and AO, just so it gets a little more realism here because this covers up a lot of surface area. It's important, like the large swath materials look the best because that's kind of what gives away if it's a rendering or not. So this is loading. And you could do things while you're like loading. You could fly around, but I uh I feel like I got into the habit when I used to do a lot of drafting to not like jump around because you never go back. So it's just like something I'm scarred from. So I've got this here. I'm going to lower the roughness a bit just so I can see some slight reflections here. You see that? I do want some gloss to there because it is kind of like a stone. Yeah, some sort of polished stone. So we want that. I could boost the reflections with specular. You can kind of see that, but I'll leave it somewhere around there. So happy with that. Turn on round corner. Okay. I should get like a t-shirt that says like turn on round corner. And then for here, for our context, this bright green, I feel like every office is kind of different in terms of how they handle it. Some do like a glass, some do like a basswood, some do like a white paint or something. So I'm going to go with the white paint method. But what I do want to say about context is in D5 2.10, the update actually added a city importer. So, I don't know exactly where this project is, but let's say, for example, you're working on a project. I'll say New York, because New York models are really hard to find. You can actually create a selection. So let's just say, Bryant Park, and you can ask it to import OpenStreetMap data for you. So if I hit import, it's going to think for a little bit and it's going to give me the terrain, the buildings, the streets, and parks. And this is like huge because doing this manually like really sucks having to use like ArcGIS and then importing it and then optimizing it for Rhino or SketchUp. It's not great. So I literally have the city model right here. And then these in my world outliner are all the categories. So I can toggle on what I want. So this is super handy. We've been using it a lot at the office just because it's not good the manual way. So I'm really glad they added that. Soon they'll add like textured buildings and that'll be huge, but this is perfect for now. So I'm just going to delete that, but I did want to point that out that you don't need to like manually model buildings. So what I'll do here is I'm just going to find either like a paint or a concrete, let's just see. And again, you can make it glass. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to do a beige concrete, and I don't want it to be beige, but I do want to show you how I'd fix that. So I'm going to go here and I'm just going to desaturate it. I spend a lot of time in the advanced settings of base color map. So if you just desaturate that, that's now gray, and it's a little bit easier to play with the coloring or the tints. So just like that. So if you want it darker, bring it down. If you want it lighter, bring it up. And all I'm going to do here is turn on my round corner and just play with the scale. So I'm going to turn on triplanar. That way it evens out the scale on every single face, and the UV randomizer, so nothing, tiles. So from far away, do we see any tiling? No. And I do like the amount of texture we're getting here. So that looks great. And we're only like 20 minutes into this, and we already have all the materials done for the project, which is pretty amazing. So now I want to talk about adding some vegetation. So I'm going to just look at the reference project, and you can see that there's a planter right here, some trees, some ivy at these courtyard areas. So let's do that real quick. So D5 comes with a bunch of different vegetation methods. You've got a brush tool, so that literally lets you paint with a brush. You've got a path tool, so you could say, hey, from point A to B, give me this. And then they have scatter, which is really powerful for handling like dense forests, large swaths of area to be covered. So for this, I'm just going to grab a path tool. So I'm going to go right under the plant tool, and I'm going to click right here. So point A to point B. And right now you can see nothing sticking because I don't have anything selected. You'll notice in the top right corner, there's a little checkbox. So it's asking you, well, what kind of plants do you want? So that's a good question. Let's go down to shrubs, and I can grab a bunch of this. I'll use, nothing too specific. Just going to grab some of these. I'll grab these, just looking for something that looks low level, nothing too tall or colorful. You have to be careful with like the colorful stuff because it can just like completely take away from your rendering. So now that I have a couple in there, let me just click from here to here. And now I've got a path, but there's not enough items here. So let me hit done. And now I can go in here and I can increase the amount of plants. So I can increase this. And, I probably want some more species. That way I have some more variation. But that's how you can easily modify this. And even if you X out of this path, right? Like I click something else, you can click it and it's all editable. And what I love about this tool is you can introduce a random direction for all your assets. That's really nice. Random spacing, right? Because plants don't grow right on top of each other. A random offset off that line, and a random size, which is really, really handy. So, like I was saying before, I'm not happy with the amount of variety I have here. So I'm just going to hit plus here. That's going to let me add some more plants. So let's keep scrolling through. I like this guy. We'll add him. Okay, that looks nice. And again, the color there is kind of muted. I'm okay with that. Let's also add this and see what that looks like. Okay, cool. And I'm just going to boost the number. Okay, cool. So we've got a bunch of plants there. I just basically want this full. The other way is you could manually just place assets, and I'm going to do a couple of that right now. So let me just go to like flowering tree. And so if I just want like key, critical trees, and like I don't want to worry about the path, I can just go to the asset library, and like any other asset, I can just click a tree and place it. So if I want Magnolia 2, I can grab that and I can place that right here, right? I think this is like slightly too large, and the little flowers are like bothering me, so I wouldn't use that. I want something slightly simpler. So it's a good idea not to use flowering tree if that bothers you. And I only say that because it could be a little distracting when you just want someone to like focus on a specific area and there's like color popping out. So I could do something like that. And you can see by default, it's automatically changing some of the scale of my assets. So here's a handy feature. If you look over here, this is the species. So it's these ilex plants. I'm going to shift click to select all of them. I can actually rotate all of them with this little button here. So again, that's going to break up, give you some variation, right? You can also randomize the size. So that's helpful as well. You can also randomize the location, but I don't do this because I kind of want them in a line. You can also single click any of these, then hit V on your keyboard and just shrink them or move them. And then another little tip I'll give you with this gizmo here on the move gizmo, if you hold down shift and drag out, you'll make a copy. So you've got a couple different ways to handle, trees like this, plantings like that. I'm going to delete probably some of these inner trees because I just want a couple, maybe we do like 3 and we'll do 4. And then I can just randomize it like that. Perfect. So now that we've got that, let's add some ivy. So ivy in D5, I'm going to just save, can be handled in 2 different ways. So if you go under Vine, you have the static assets and procedural assets. So static meaning I grab this and it's a mesh that I can apply to any surface. So let's say it's growing from here, right? This is static. It doesn't matter what the geometry is. It's just its own 3D asset that can clip through things. There's also the procedural system. So if I grab this and I place it right here, you see this little projector beam. So if I rotate it, make sure the arrow is pointing at the face you want it to go. So I'm going to say somewhere around here. Okay, and let me just rotate this just a little bit more. I want it to spawn there. I'm going to scale it up, and it will spawn ivy on this face. And this thing is crazy. This is like, I love this thing. This is like an amazing tool that D5 has. So watch this. When I'm happy with that, I can hit generate, and it's going to look at the geometry, and bam, it's going to build it over that geometry. It's not perfect. I am going to get some clipping there because there were 2 faces next to each other, but this is all dynamic. So I can change the scale of my leaves. I can change the density, right? The angle, how wide or far it grows out. And again, it's paying attention to the geometry. Like I can't stress that enough. Like I don't need to sit here and manually set dress each of these areas I want ivy because I could just, use the procedural generation tool and it'll figure it out for me. So that's really nifty. There are some areas I noticed like on smaller geometry that it's probably better you grab one of these and put it just because it doesn't recognize it 100%. It's close, but it's not perfect. So they make some that kind of drape over like this. So watch this. I grab this, I can just do this. So I can just move it into place and hit V. I can also scale in one direction. So if I break the scaler here, hit V, I can go this way if I want. So I'm just going to do something like this. I'm going to shift copy and I'm going to scale a little bit. Just kind of want to break up the sizing so it doesn't look so samey. I'll also swap out assets. So this I can swap out with another asset. So check this out. If you go over here, you hit this crown looking button and hit replace from assets, you could switch it with something else and it will replace it with that. Let me hit confirm and do that one more time. There we go. You gotta make sure you hit the check mark. I had it on my cursor, so that's why we had a duplicate, but that's what you can do. So if I want to switch it back to something else, I can click that and this should swap. Yeah, there we go. I'm just gonna drop that in there. So it looks a little weird, but anyways, you get my point. There's a couple different ways to handle the ivy here. So procedural or static. So I'm just gonna turn the corner here and then we'll add some more plants. We'll add some cars and then we'll do some environment settings and that's it. So once I have kind of like a stretch that I really like, I'll turn it into kind of like a group or a copy. So I'm happy with this. I'm going to hit control and now I've got two selected here. I can right click and I can make it a group. And now when I click one of them, all of them get selected. So I'm just going to shift copy to bring it down this direction. Okay. And rotate it. So now I can just put it here. You always want to make sure that it's not like clipping, that it sits appropriately. And I'll do that. And I'll bring it out a bit. Again, that's my point on clipping. So it looks great. Okay, I could do the same thing up here as well. So I'm just gonna shift click. We'll rotate a bit. And I'll go and place it up here. So again, I don't know exactly where they're gonna have ivy, but if I were doing this, it's kind of what I would do. I've got that. And then I can just shift. And I'm not too worried about the sizing and the scaling just because I'm taking a front rendering. It's very unlikely that somebody's going to be able to like see all that. So that looks good. And I'm not too worried about that collision there because that's like inside the building. So now I'm just going to add a couple trees in here and kind of beautify it. But you could spend like as much time as you want doing this. This, in my opinion, takes the most time, but I feel like it gives you the most like bang for your buck in terms of your time because if you do it right, it's really gonna improve your building. Like look at that, like that added so much richness to the building in just seconds. So let me grab some more trees. Grab something a little thinner. Yep, let's grab this guy. And anywhere I think is a courtyard, I'm going to drop it there. So right now you can see this is huge. So if you hold down C on your keyboard and drag down, you can scale in real time. So I'll drop that there. And we'll place a couple here. And a couple up here. And I can always go back and reduce the scale. Okay, so I think slightly too large. So I'm just going to hold control and I'm just going to scale down. Okay, cool. So little cool thing I want to point out is we've got all this amazing vegetation and everything just to see like kind of like a before and after. I'm going to make a new layer and I'm going to call this vegetation. Okay. And now I want all the trees and the plantings that I've placed to be on that layer. So right here is a filter. If I click the filter and click nature and then just shift click all this stuff. Right up here is the layer it's on. If I switch it to vegetation, it's now in the vegetation layer. If I turn this off, look at that. And that only took 2 seconds just to get organized, but huge before and after, right? And this is actually how I handle options. I'll put an option on its own, layer, and then I'll toggle it on and off because scenes, the actual like rendering viewport, can remember visibility of items or objects and layers. Okay, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to save there. Okay, and now that I've got that there, I'm going to just drop in a car and we'll talk about environment settings and then we'll do a little rendering. So I want a car. So I'm just going to go under vehicle, and I'm gonna grab something small size. I'll grab this lucid here, and I'm just gonna rotate it. Okay, and for some reason, there we go. All right, great. So I'm gonna place this here. I'm in the US, so we drive on the right, but it's probably more like this, but don't mind me there. And I'm doing this because I want to show you a cool little feature they added in the AI enhancer right when we do a rendering. So talking about the rendering, let's talk about getting that set up. So right over here, create new scene. If I do that, it's basically a hotspot. So if I move my camera here and go here, it's going to move me to that camera point, and it's going to remember all the time of day setting, visibility settings. So really, really powerful that you're using this. There's also an easy way to like walk you through the client if they're like sitting next to you and you want to do kind of like a 3D tour. This is what I would recommend. So if I want to edit the camera settings, I'm going to click this little button here. Yes, that's actually a button. A lot of people don't realize that that's a button. This is telling me that it's an active view. If I uncheck mark this, I'm actually going to get a picture-in-picture view, which is pretty handy if you're set dressing and you want to see what the viewport will look like. So if I pin this, this is the camera, right? And watch this. This is where things get cool because if I shift out here, I can now see how this tree is going to impact my rendering. So I'm going to have a bunch of these trees because I do want the shadow on the road. But this is also how you can kind of frame if you should have trees around the view. So remember, you've got like a little picture in picture mode. So activate here or there to do that. So now that I've got that there, I'm going to turn off exposure. Auto exposure always gets people in trouble. And I'm just going to lower it a bit so it's not so bright, just for the sake of this. I'm going to switch projection mode to be 2-point because you want nice, strong, beautiful verticals. And this is like how all architectural photography is shot. So I'm going to do something like that. That looks very heroic. I'm happy with that. Then there's the focal length. So everyone's got different preferences on this. I'm going to boost this a little bit to like 22. I don't like going too high or too low just because it gets distorted. Okay. Yeah, we got 15 minutes there. Yeah, we'll make it. So we've got this there. Let's do 20. That looks good. So I'm trying to balance getting the top of the building and the trees. And one thing I can do is play with the aspect ratio. So 16:9 is what we're typically used to. This is like your landscape format, but our building is quite tall. So I could do something squarish or portrait-like. So this is a portrait format. I do need to play with the focal length to kind of fit everything in here. So I really like the framing of all this. I've got the framing here of that tree. I can also see my car here. And I like the framing there. So I'm good with this. I really like seeing all this variety there. And now I'm going to turn on depth of field and I'm going to set a focus. I want it to focus on the building. So I'm going to left click the building, then right click to cancel that. And now watch this. I'm going to add the blur. And you see how it blurred anything close to me? I usually set this to 7. I don't go beyond that because it looks a little cartoony and not realistic. And I'm always hitting update scene. It's just like a little paranoia thing where I don't want to lose my work. And now let's get into environment settings. So we were just using the dynamic geo and sky function, which I think like right now looks phenomenal. Like this looks great. I'd be happy with this rendering. But if you want to take it to the next level, I do recommend using an HDRI to improve the realism because it takes the lighting and shadow information from the HDRI to give you really nice realism. If you don't like messing with all these settings, there is the D5 Studio. So you can actually just go to D5 Curated and then load up one of their own presets. So if I did exterior clear sky, I'm going to load this up and it's going to give me an HDRI sometimes if they didn't use a dynamic system. And yeah, there's the HDRI and all the settings that they use. So like for the environment and everything, I can turn on the sun. So pretty powerful and pretty handy that they have that there. So I'm just going to do, let's see, exterior sunset. And if that doesn't work, yeah, that's a little too bright for me. Let's try exterior day. If not, I'm just going to switch to my go-to settings. Yeah, that's a little too rosy. So we're going to do it. We're going to do it my way now. So I'm just going to click to revert my scene. I'm going to go over to HDRI. And when I do light setups, I'd like to duplicate the scene just so I always have an original saved. So I'm going to go there. I'm going to go to environment. And I love using midday too, just because I get some sort of clouds, and I'm going to toggle on my sun. Okay. So this is the actual sun. If I rotate the HDRI, the sun will rotate as well with it. The problem with that is, let's say there is a specific portion of the HDRI you really like, but you're not happy with the sun position. You can break that with custom right here. So you keep the HDRI position, but you can change the azimuth, so the rotation, and the altitude without changing the HDR image. So you get the benefits of like everything if you're using HDRI with a custom setup. So I recommend doing that. Um, I'm going to make this slightly warmer. This is the sun color. Okay. And this looks pretty good. I'm going to save this. Okay. I could add some fog if I want to add some sort of like contrast in the background, but I don't want to go too crazy, just a little bit. Again, I always hit update. And then if I want to go crazy, I could add a lookup table. I could play with the exposure a little bit more, but I'm really happy with how this is turning out. I could add a little bit of contrast, not too much, a little bit of highlights. Okay. And a little bit of bloom. Okay. So this looks pretty good. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion. And this is where it's going to give me contact shadows. So anywhere you see darkness, those are contact shadows. And you can overlay it in your preview just to get even more realism in all these crevices. So I always have that on. Really helps with the foliage. So I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to render this out. All I'm going to do is go to image, and I'm going to click 2K preset, and I'm not going to have any channels on. I'm going to leave that all off. I'm happy with the aspect ratio, and I'm going to hit render, and then I'll show you some AI stuff with it, and we'll save that out. I'm not using the path tracer right now just for the sake of time, but the new path tracer adds some great realism with the reflections and everything. And this is also when I start tuning my glass to see if it looks right or not. So I want this to go quick. So I'm just using the regular, previous model. So far, we're getting like an image in like 20 minutes. If I had more time, I would probably add some decals here, like some fallen leaves, some grunge here. That way it's not so clean, but got to respect everyone's time. So 30 seconds for that. Then let's go to AI post-processing. Going to double click my image here, and I can run it through an AI enhancer. So the AI enhancer is just going to improve the realism of everything. And it's really like amazing. And I recommend using it because you just bring your images to the next level for doing nothing. You can also, and this is new in 2.10, you can add motion blur to like cars and everything. You could select, and it's going to generate an AI channel map. That's why I didn't render one before, so you could see this process. And this is helping it understand what the image is made up of. It's segmenting it. So if I just select this car here and I add, an angle and a weight, it'll actually blur out the car, which is really cool. So it's adding motion blur. You see that? So that's crazy. So that's like built-in post-processing. If you want, you have that there. If not, I just do the typical AI enhancer, and then that gives me a nicer image quality. So it basically makes all the vegetation realistic, the materials realistic. I will say with 2.10, I've run into a couple issues where it just doesn't do anything. So I'm a little concerned nothing will pop out. But if nothing does pop out, this is what we were able to do in a very short period of time. So I'll leave it there for this demo. I know we covered a lot, but I do want to have some time for questions. If anyone was following along and has a question about the process.
Andy, I'm going to ask a quick question here. This
Sure.
is way in the details technically, but are there snapping controls with the gizmo? So when you're doing the rotating and the moving and things like that, does D5 offer you to be able to snap to 90-degree rotation, for
Yeah,
instance?
yeah. So it does. Yeah, I don't think the enhancer is going to work for me right now for some odd reason. But anytime you rotate an asset, let me get out of this. Just gonna make a new scene. Let me show you. I grab here. It's hard to see, but it's going to snap. Yeah, you see the 90. So it's snapping there.
Yeah.
So it's there. It's baked in. Yeah, it snapped to 180. snap to 90 again. So yeah, it does have
Cool.
that by default. Yeah, and that's really really useful because I feel like we're all used to like CAD and having those snaps and Revit and all that.
Yeah, I just noticed as you're replacing those, the ivy and stuff, just being able to rotate that really quickly to 90 and have it snap and know that those corners, those cornices are 90 degrees at this point, right? Pretty easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want that to be off a couple degrees because then it just looks weird. Yeah, weird that my AI enhancer does this now. I don't know why, but it's kind of a bummer. They also added this like great in painting feature, so it can enhance like the quality of like people and cars and everything. So really, really incredible. Same thing with the sky; can completely overhaul the sky and the time of day. Um, but yeah, I always have this issue when I do the live demos. I don't know what it is. It's really bizarre, but that's just the nature of things. Oh, here now it's going. All right, thank goodness.
Can
Um,
you chat a little bit about your hardware setup, Andy? Just what's your spec on this setup?
Yeah. So if you're ever curious like how D5 is running, if you go under the settings button and then you go to view and then whoops, view, show statistics, you'll get the frame rate up here. I just upgraded my GPU to a 5080. And because of that, I actually get these benefits of super resolution, frame gen, and an FPS booster. So this scene with my 3080 that I was using before, I probably would have been getting like 20 or 30 frames per second. And now I'm able to handle like 5 million faces at, over 100 FPS sometimes. So that's pretty crazy. So definitely worth the upgrade. My CPU is an i7 10700K. Definitely older. I'm using like a rig that I've been Frankensteining for the past like 5 6 years. But nothing crazy. I feel like that's a pretty modest CPU. So this is here we go. This is the in painting, and just pay attention to the vegetation and the bricks too. But it just like makes everything look better, more realistic. Same thing with the clouds. It gives you that extra definition. So that's why it's worth running it through here. Yeah, added some more texture and grunge. And yeah, that's something I would definitely do if I had the time, like adding the decaling and everything. But huge, huge improvements. Makes the glass, the paint look better. So yeah, for less than, 45 minutes to do all this to get rendering quality like this, that's huge. And like this is, in my opinion, again, humble brag here. I think this is better than the marketing materials this company used. So pretty nuts what D5 can give you. Yeah, there we go. That's working. Cool.
Stella dropped a question in the chat there.
So great question, Stella. It works two ways. It really depends on the kind of firm and the kind of client. If it's like a small firm residential, anytime I've worked with them, I have to model everything from scratch. They'll send me like CAD backgrounds because they're still using CAD, and then we'll model it up in SketchUp. We'll do all the architectural shell stuff there, and then render it out in D5. For larger, more I don't know, tech savvy firms, I usually get the model. I usually get that. I noticed if it's like beyond one family residential, they usually give you a model just because they need the model for their own design because it's gotten too complicated, and that usually comes in the flavor of like Revit, Rhino, or SketchUp, which D5 handles beautifully. But it is going to vary. I know that I'm sure there's some small one family residential shops that model, but I'm just saying based on my experience, that's what I've seen that I have to generate versus getting something. Like this was a larger project, and I know it's a project through Corey, but they supplied the model.
So Andy, just you use the SketchUp importer for this particular demo today. What are the other ways to get models into D5 and um, what are the options of working as in, for instance, exporting out a model, file linking models, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. So what I did here, because again, I don't know, what software people have. I use the direct import method. So this I kind of call it the geometry freeze method. So meaning I've taken the model at a specific, snapshot of its state, and I can always update it. If I right click it, I can reload from local or replace from local, and I can give it the fresh new version. But that is manual, but sometimes that's how it works. The other method, if I'm in SketchUp, there is SketchUp, Rhino, 3ds Max, all those. There is the live sync plugin, meaning if I move my camera in SketchUp, it moves it in D5. If I model something in SketchUp, it appears in D5 automatically. So that's like a phenomenal way if you like having your modeling software on the left and D5 on the right, so you can render and design at the same time. You can do that. And then there's also the export method, which I usually use it if I'm dealing with a lot of like proxies where I'm working with a landscape designer. They're giving me like symbols or cylinders for where plants or trees go. I can export those out into D5. Each of them gets recognized as their own mesh, and then I can replace those assets with beautiful D5 assets. So you're just using the proxy to realistic asset workflow. But generally speaking, it's going to depend on kind of your working scenario and how the client or your company works. If you go direct or you go live sync, the I guess the biggest advice I would give someone is whichever method it is, you got to stick to it because the way materials are handled on the back end are completely different. So if you start working with direct and then you switch that model to be live sync, it's going to break all your materials and you're going to be sad. So just remember that. But there are plenty of ways to use D5 with your source modeler.
So Andy, if you did some work in a SketchUp file and did a local update on this, the materials that you placed in the original geometry, and if you expanded out the geometry and changed the geometry in the SketchUp model, all those original changes you made to the materials will be applied to the newly imported model
Yeah.
parts and
Yeah,
pieces.
exactly. Like what I could do, I'm not going to edit the one that everyone has access to. Actually, you know what? I'll do that. ArchVision, make a copy. Let's just say test upload update. And so like here, I purposely changed the name of the file. And let me open this up. So I changed that. So you can change the file location, the name, and the contents for when you do a replace or reload. So SketchUp should be, yep. I feel like it's really rare that I open up SketchUp and it doesn't hassle me to log in again. So I think we got lucky here. So this is loading. So let's say I've got, I don't know, I've got some, yeah, that's the live sync plugin, and that's what that looks like. So I'm just going to add, just to keep things, you know what, let's do it proper. Let's just say they're building a skyscraper next door. We've got that. So this is obviously visibly different. I'm going to save that. I'm going to go over to D5 and just hop out of there. I'm going to right click, replace from local, and let me just save just in case I mess up anything here. Replace from local. It's going to ask me where's that saved. I'm going to go to my Dropbox, our ArchVision folder, and I'm going to hit test update. So I've changed the name. I've kept the file location, but it's the same workflow. And if I look over here, there we go. That's our skyscraper. So that's what I mean by like the direct import geometry freeze method. The other method is if I do a live sync. So if I hit connect to D5, it's going to start thinking. Please wait for the delivery to complete. So it looks like it's thinking. Here we go. So this is what I mean by breaking your material. Here, if I clicked update this SketchUp model, right, it's going to break my materials. If I hit create new link, it's going to be another file. And watch this. If I grab this guy and I put D5 right over here, yeah, D5 doesn't snap to Windows, which is really like annoying. But watch this. As I move in SketchUp, it moves here. So you're seeing this flickering because I have the live sync plugin and the model that I imported directly on top of each other. So I'm just going to hide them. So now I can, be Mr. Architect. I can push and pull. This will go up, and that should kick in. I might have an older version of the plugin where I have to manually click update, but again, the point stands that it's pretty interactive. So now you've got your little renderer on the right. Yeah, so I can just yeah, there we go. So I can go
Sweet.
here. Yeah, so that's really it. But yeah, there we go. Now it's working. Yeah, so thank you again for having me. Yeah, I'll hang around for a couple minutes if anyone's got questions. But again, my name is Andy Cristoforo. I run a great YouTube channel, and I definitely recommend checking out the ArchViz Academy. I think it's a fantastic community, and if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email.
Andy, thanks so much for doing this today, and we look forward to doing more of these down the road with you. Maybe other applications, other subject matter, as opposed to a little high rise in downtown Bryant Park, for instance, that we're putting in there today. It's kind of a little fun effort. If anyone has any questions, feel free to email Andy or us, sales@archvision.com. We'll send out a follow-up email after this with a download link for the 3D model again, and as well link to the YouTube recording and any other links that Andy wants to include with this. So thank you all for attending today, and we appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and learn with us. So thank you so much.